For family dinners, I mean, I like to keep it quick. I like to keep it simple. I either do things that are prepared in advance and I pull them out and reheat them, or I'll do something that will cook really quickly. In this case, I picked up a pork loin, just a small little pork tenderloin, and I got it on sale. It was really, really affordable. I think I paid $4. I think there were 2 for $8, so I picked up 2, threw one in the freezer, have one out. And then I've just got some pork stuffing, some collard greens, some apples, onion, and brown gravy. I'm going to show you how to make a really beautiful plate that's cost-effective and tasty. So for this dish, what I did was I peeled some apples. I've got my onion ready to cut. I'm just going to do a quick dice on these apples. I take off one side, lay it down on the flat side, and then just go around the core. It's okay if there's a little skin in there. It's not going to cause any issues, and it gives you a few vitamins as well. Now you can cut these into, really thin slices, but I actually prefer to do them fairly chunky and just leave them, relatively thick slices, and that way they give you nice texture at the end. You'll see what I mean. A little bruising is fine. In fact, I use my bruised apples in this dish because once you cook them, you can't even tell. So it's a good way to get rid of some apples that might be on their way out the door. If you work slowly, you might want to put a little lemon juice on them so that they don't brown up too much more. But I'm going to go pretty quick here, so I'm not too worried. So then I take my onion, and you guessed it, I'm going to small dice that sucker. Now this last piece is the more challenging one because it's got the pork. So I always grab these up at the top because I don't want to get the juice all over me either. Ew. I slice the package through, tear off the top. I pour out the juice in the sink, and there I'm left with just a nice, beautiful pork loin. And you can trim off some of the fat if you want to. They always leave extra fat on because it means that the package is going to weigh more, which means that they can make more money. It also, though, is a nice... I like to leave the skin on the on pork loins because pork is a very lean meat. So if you have some fat in there, it doesn't hurt to leave it on. It helps to give some flavor and keep it moist. So obviously, you've got this pork loin. You can do any number of things with it. You could sear off this whole piece and roast it in the oven for about probably 35 minutes, maybe 40, and have a beautiful roast pork tenderloin. The other option, though, and the one I choose to do often, is to cut medallions because they cook faster. So when I get home from work and I don't have a lot of time, I don't want to sit around and wait for a roast pork. And I certainly don't want to wait until Sunday, which is when most people do their roasts, right? So essentially, I just turn it on its side here. And I go about an inch thick, and I slice it down, and I've got a beautiful medallion. And that'll take just a couple of minutes to cook. I'll leave that one. I'd rather go too thick than too thin, so I'm going to leave that one just as it is. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces out of this. So depending on how many people in your family and how hungry they are, you might be able to feed 7 people with this. I'm going to go over to the stoves now. We'll put it all together. Again, this is just a dish, sauteed pork loin with apples, collard greens. Okay, so we have a pan on the stove. I'm going to start it with just a tiny bit of olive oil. I'm going to make sure my pan is hot before I introduce any food to it. And I can tell that my pan is hot when I put my olive oil in and the olive oil ripples when it touches the pan. You can see it in the oil itself. It just has that little shimmer as it's in there. So my pork is already seasoned. I do not recommend adding additional seasoning because when you buy things pre-seasoned, they tend to really go heavy on the salt. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop it in. Don't overcrowd your pan because you want to get a nice color. So I'm not going to try to cook all of these at once. Well, my pan is big enough I can actually. But remember that you don't want to overcrowd, because when you overcrowd, you're essentially going to steam your food instead of sauteing it. And you want that saute so that you can get that really rich, dark brown color. And I'm on a full-on high heat here. And again, with this fat on here, you can turn it so the fat renders a little bit, and that'll add just that extra little bit of yum. Now, pans will always have hot spots. Like right now, this is my hot spot. And over here is my hot spot. On this side, it's a little cooler because of the pan isn't sitting evenly on the flame. So I'm going to be mindful and adjust my where I place the meat accordingly. Will cook very, very quickly, so you don't need to spend a ton of time on this stage. You do not need to cook pork to well done. You can go to a very, very solid medium well and still have it nice and juicy on the inside. In the professional kitchen, we test our meat done this just by touch. So if it's firm to the touch, you know that it's done, right? So this one is still really soft. This one is already getting firm. So that's going to be my first one out of the pan. This one, because it's thicker, is going to take longer. It's still really soft. Different cuts of meat will firm up more quickly than others. A chicken breast is going to feel firm before a chicken thigh will. So just be mindful and use practice. If you're in doubt, always use just a kitchen thermometer and make sure that you get a temp with pork of at least over 140 to 145. If you like it more well done than that, you can certainly cook it longer. Just don't cook it until it's dry. That's the only rule I have. And you can see I'm getting some really beautiful color on these. My pan is nice and hot. These are going to be delicious. Go ahead and take this one out. They're not quite cooked yet. I'm taking out before they're completely finished. And that's by design. And I'll show you why here in a second. I'm going to let those rest and hold for a few minutes while I prepare the rest of the dish. I'm going to go in with just a tiny bit more olive oil, about a teaspoon. And I'm going to hit it with our diced onion. I'm going to turn my heat down just a pinch to medium. I'm going to go in with my apple. I don't want to cook the apples down too long because I don't want them to turn into mush. Just long enough to get some color and to soften a pinch. Remember, food is about texture too. So you want different textures in different bites. One ingredient I forgot to put in the initial picture is just a little bit of apple cider vinegar. We use Bragg's because it has the mother in it. It's raw and unfiltered. So that's got really excellent flavor, but any apple cider vinegar will do. And what that's going to do is it's going to cut the bitterness of the kale as well as sweeten. Believe it or not, vinegar will sweeten the dish because it draws up. We're going to deglaze the pan and bring up the fond that's in there from cooking the meat. So now that my apples and onions have got beautiful color, and they picked up all that beautiful juice from the pork loin, I'm going to go ahead and hit that with some collards. And then I'm going to deglaze the pan with just a little bit of vinegar, maybe a tablespoon. Oh, that smells so good. So now that the apples and collards have cooked, I'm going to reintroduce the pork to reheat it a little bit. Just to make sure that it's cooked through all the way. And again, I'm doing this all in the same pan. And then the last step is going to be, believe it or not, these packaged gravies come in so handy when you're in a hurry. I just do a cup of water and a little gravy, and I'll show you in a minute what I do with that. Okay, so now I know my pork is done. I've temped it. It's beautiful, it's perfect, it's ready to serve. It's got gorgeous color. I'm going to set it off to the side, and then all of the bits and pieces in the pan make for a beautiful sauce. So I added cold water to my gravy mix, and there is my sauce. Now, yes, there are ways that you can do this without using a packet. This just cuts down on time, and it heightens the appeal of the dish if you have a little sauce. Another little trick to bring out the flavor of the sauce and to really help the profile of the dish is to add just a tiny bit of mustard. I'd say a teaspoon to this amount. Not enough so that you necessarily taste it as mustard, but enough so that it just brings the whole dish together. I'm going to go a little thinner with my sauce there. And now it's time to plate. Okay, so to plate this, I've got a little bit of stuffing that I made. I just followed the directions on the package. Again, packaged is not a bad thing. It's what you do with it that matters, right? I do try to make all of my own when I can, when I have the time, when I have the means. But sometimes I gotta get dinner on the table. So I put a little bit of stuffing. I'm gonna put some of the collard and apple mixture onto the plate. I'm going to make sure I get a nice portion of collards and apple because that's delicious and healthy and really balances the plate. And then the nice thing is you can slice these medallions. You can slice them just on a bias here. Right? And that's beautifully cooked. It's just ever so medium well. And you can just slice it. And you could do 1 or 2 pieces per plate. You could also just leave it whole and pop them on like that, depending on what your preference is. This one's a little bit under, so I'm going to pop that one back in the pan. This one's going to be done. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to finish it with a little bit of sauce on the end here. I don't want to go over the pork necessarily. I don't want to hide my beautiful pork. But if I go over the edges here, put a little bit on my apples so they stay shiny. And there you have it. I don't know, looks good enough to eat to me. So a beautiful pork dish that took about 15 minutes to prep. Happy eating. Be sure to reach out if you have questions.